Hello. Oh, what's going on? Sorry about that. Hey, I'm Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show, where we watch old 16mm films, except when we don't. And that last film that we watched was something we found at a thrift store in Durham, North Carolina. And it's 35mm, and we scanned it, which is why it's in such great shape. There's also, I think it was negative too. And it said Mr. Cash on it, and there was a local payday lender named Mr. Cash. And so I'm sure it's for that, but I don't ever remember there being film. Like, their commercials are almost all video, and they are all like, you know, have a unexpected repair bills. Thanks, Mr. Cash. They'd always have like this handful of cash, and so it's kind of a mystery, like why they had such high film production. Like, I'm not sure exactly what was going on with that, but whoever they went with shot it on 35, and we ended up with it. And so, otherwise, we almost always show 16mm film. For example, behind me, I have on the telecine, I have a film set up. This is Life and Times of the Iron Horse. Enjoy.
You can hear a whistle blow a million miles, 'cause this train run me right. I'll be home Saturday night, though I'm 900 miles from my home. I still love to hear that lonesome whistle blow, that long lonesome train whistling down.
What was America like before that long, lonesome whistle echoed from one end of the country to the other? How did people get around? How did they transport the things they grew to where they might sell and trade them for the things they needed? Well, in those days, the cheapest and easiest transportation was by water. Pioneers west of the Alleghenies, including a young fellow by the name of Abe Lincoln, used the current of the Mississippi River to float flatboats loaded with farm produce down to New Orleans. The trouble was, the river's current made it strictly a one-way road. Naturally, men began to make their own rivers. They called them canals. River roads that permitted traffic in both directions.
Although a canal is a two-way road, yes, a canal is a two-way road. It's slow in the summer and breeze in the cold. Oh, that's no way to move a payload. No, that's no way to move a payload. That's no way to move a payload.
Of course, all the roads in those days weren't water roads. There were roads on land, dirt roads called turnpikes.
Now a turnpike could make an east-west haul. Turnpike could make an east-west haul, but it was dusty all summer, muddy spring and fall.
A better way of building roads had to be developed. Roads made out of rails had been used in England in the coal mines. Since a horse could pull a much heavier load on a road of rails than on an ordinary dirt road, folks felt that roads of rails could be built for general use. But they still had to rely on the horse for power. Some men, however, were tinkering with the use of an entirely new kind of power for transportation. The fact that water, heated into steam, occupies 1,600 times as much space as it did in liquid form was destined to be the most important fact in the conquest of the American continent. It was the fact behind the steam engine. It meant the discovery of a source of power to do things that men had always done by hand. Way back in 1807, Robert Fulton proved that a steam engine could be made to turn paddle wheels to drive a boat on water. An Englishman named George Stephenson tackled the more difficult problem of harnessing steam power and making it propel a wagon on land. Stephenson set out to build a horse of iron, successful steam locomotive. The Iron Horse was born.
Oh, they brought it to America for the Camden and Amboy, the Mohawk and the Hudson line. And the Boston and Worcester, Baltimore and Susquehanna all had trains running mighty fine.
A miraculous thing had happened. People were able to hurtle through the American countryside at breakneck speeds, sometimes even exceeding 20 miles an hour. Of course, folks had to put up with a few inconveniences. Coaches were tied together with chains. When the locomotive started, the coaches were jerked into motion, and sometimes passengers were thrown off their seats. The first roads of rails, iron straps on wooden stringers supported by granite blocks, wore away quickly and often ripped loose. When this happened, the rails could be as deadly as a rattlesnake, and they were called snakeheads. Snakeheads continued to menace passengers until the railroad builders began to use wooden cross ties in a bed of yielding gravel to support the rails. But that only solved part of the problem. Robert L. Stevens, builder of the first railroad in New Jersey, went a good deal further. He designed a rail shaped like a T to be made entirely of iron. The T shape gave the best support for the amount of iron used, and it could also be spiked directly to the ties. His T-rail design is still used today. The locomotive, too, was changed to make it more suitable for American conditions. American railroads were built with many curves because of the ruggedness of the countryside. American mechanics removed the stationary front axle of the English locomotives. In its place, they substituted a front truck with 2 axles and 4 wheels, pivoted to the locomotive frame. This made it possible for the machine to take curves with less wear and tear on wheels and rails. Railroading in America quickly outdistanced the development of railroad transportation in the rest of the world. And this was no accident. Probably no other nation at any time in history so needed cheap, efficient overland transportation as the vast, rugged landmass of the United States in the 19th century. To the inland farmers, the railroads meant the possibility of shipping their surplus products directly to the east. To the farmer's wife, the railroads meant the possibility of buying and receiving the manufactured products of the city's factories. Farm life was transformed. The railroads provided a window to the world. Now that farmers could sell their surplus products, they gave up self-sufficient farming and raised crops and livestock for sale. The cities, too, were transformed by the power and the magic of the Iron Horse. As farmers bought more manufactured goods, more and bigger factories were built in the cities. City populations doubled, tripled, quadrupled, and the inexhaustible Iron Horse carried the food over long distances to feed the city folk. The very face of America was changed. The railroads pushed farther and farther west, opened new frontiers, spurring the settlement of what had been an almost uninhabited wasteland. But the Iron Trail of the Iron Horse was not always. The railroads were also freighted with disaster.
On a dark and stormy night, not a star was in sight, and the north wind came howling down the line. with his fireman right near, stood a brave engineer, a-bringing in that train right on time. Well, the wheels hummed a song as the train rolled along, and the black smoke came pouring from the stack, and the headlight a-gleam sent out a piercing beam as his train thundered down on the track. As he rounded the hill, his brave heart stood still. A warning light was shining in his face. There was a bridge around the bend, and he knew this was the end, for the old iron bridge had crumbled out of place.
A clue to the menace of the iron horse could be found in its name, iron. Iron was not strong enough to stand the strain of constant use, tremendous weight and power, and sustained high speeds. Iron rails wore out too rapidly. Iron bridges collapsed too often. Man already knew how to make steel, but in those days, steel could only be made in small batches by heating iron in a crucible for 2 weeks in order to drive out the carbon. But then in the 1850s, a remarkable new, fast, and inexpensive method of making steel was discovered. This was the Bessemer process, and it made it possible to produce tons and tons of steel in a few minutes. Steel for sturdier rails, steel for stronger bridges, steel for more powerful locomotives, and steel for heavier rolling stock. Soon, a great network of steel spanned the vast American continent. The fantastic dream of a railroad going all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific was realized. The last steel rails were fastened in place on May 10th, 1869, symbolizing the final conquest of the American continent. America was coming to maturity, riding on the railroad.
This train I ride on, she goes from coast to coast. You can hear a whistle blow a million miles, 'cause this train runs me right. I'll be home Saturday night, though I'm many, many miles from my home. I still love to hear that lonesome whistle blow, that long, lonesome train whistling down.
So there are railroad enthusiasts who there's a little bit of overlap between them and film collectors, and what happens is we see footage that has old railroads and engines in operation tend to go for a little bit more on eBay, because those collectors are looking for specific locomotives or specific trains or specific routes where the trains went, and home movie footage sometimes will get cut up so that they'll like highlight that footage, which is unfortunate because that you remove that context that's there. Speaking of overlaps, sewing machines and projectors are very similar. And it should be no surprise that Singer, at some point, they had their own projectors that looked a little like, if you didn't like open the case, you'd say like, wow, this looks like this is a sewing machine. You open it up and it's a Graflex film projector. And, you know, it's all about this intermittent movement and all this stuff. Anyway, so this film is about sewing machines. Enjoy. Oh, and Alex, thank you for the coffee. Coffee is a great way to reward AV Geeks at buymeacoffee.com/AVGeeks. So here's sewing machines.
This is how a needle used to be worked into cloth, slowly, by hand. But when a machine drives that needle, it can sew 30 times as fast. No wonder girls everywhere want to use a sewing machine.
How does a machine make stitches so fast?
Basically, what the sewing machine does is interlace two continuous threads to form a line of stitching. The spool supplies the upper thread, and the bobbin supplies the lower thread. For a smooth, even stitch, both spool and bobbin threads must be kept at the same tension and fed at the same speed.
How will I know if these are right?
This is what happens if the spool thread is too loose. And this is what happens if the bobbin thread is too loose. This is the basic design of all sewing machines. All the working parts are contained in the head.
Are all the machines alike?
No, there are more than 4,000 makes, but all of them use the same principles. The bed covers the lower part of the machine's mechanism. The throat plate has a hole in it for the needle and a gauge to measure the distance from it. The bed slide covers the bobbin case and the bobbin. Feed dogs are teeth that grip the cloth against the presser foot and move it along at each stitch. This is the arm. It contains the parts which control the needle as the upper part of the stitch is formed. The stop-motion screw disengages the needle mechanism and keeps the needle from going up and down needlessly when filling the bobbin. Before starting to sew again, it has to be tightened. The balance or hand wheel is used to help the machine stop and start smoothly. Some wheels turn toward you, and some turn away from you, depending upon the machine. Sewing machines have 3 tensions. They keep the thread even and tight. The lower tension controls the bobbin thread. Another tension holds the thread while it's being spooled on the bobbin. The upper tension controls the thread going to the needle.
Should we adjust these?
No, they have been preset for you. The thread take-up lever goes up and down with the needle. It pulls the thread from the upper tension and gives just enough thread to the needle for each stitch. It must be all the way up when threading.
Why up?
Otherwise, it would pull the thread right out of the needle when you start to sew. The pressure foot holds the fabric against the feed dogs. They work together to feed the cloth through the machine. The pressure bar lever raises and lowers the pressure foot. The stitch regulator controls the size of the stitch. On most machines, the stitches vary between 6 per inch and a tiny 30 per inch. The stitch regulator actually makes the feed dogs feed faster or slower. The faster they feed, the fewer times per inch the needle goes in, making the stitches larger. The stitch regulator also makes the machine sew in reverse by making the feed dogs go in reverse.
When would you sew in reverse?
For darning and also as one way of knotting. On this paper sample, you can see what the various stitch sizes actually look like. Try out the different settings for yourself on a sample of cloth. Needles have a groove on one side, running the length of the needle. You must insert the needle so that the groove is on the same side as the thread guide, because the thread fits into this groove as it goes from the last thread guide to the eye. If the needle is not correctly in place, or if the thread isn't in right, the machine won't stitch. All the parts of the sewing machine have been introduced. Can you name them? The head, bed, arm, stitch control or regulator, balance wheel, stop motion screw, bobbin winder, thread guides, thread take-up, upper tension or needle tension, presser bar lifter behind the arm, needle, presser foot, throat plate, feed dogs, bed slide, bobbin, lower tension or bobbin tension. A sewing machine should give many years of service if handled properly. Return the head to its cabinet carefully and gently. Use the same care when lifting it out. To clean and oil the machine, remove the throat plate. Some throat plates lift up by means of a lever, and some require a screwdriver. Brush or blow out the lint that collects around the feed dogs. A drop of oil in each of the oil holes will keep your machine running smoothly.
When can we start sewing?
Just as soon as you learn to fill the bobbin and thread the machine. Most bobbins are filled by pressing the bobbin winding mechanism against the balance wheel.
Can I use a bobbin from home?
Not usually. A bobbin is actually a part of the machine, and you must have the right one. The thread goes on evenly. This is the action of the bobbin winding tension. On this machine, the bobbin is threaded directly from the needle. While this machine threads the bobbin on top.
How full should the bobbin be?
Fill it with as much thread as you need. It will automatically stop when it's full enough.
Where do you put the filled bobbin?
Some machines have the case built into the machine. Others have removable bobbin cases. The bobbin, or case, must be put in the machine the right way for that particular machine. Then the thread is pulled through the bobbin tension hook.
Which is the right way?
All bobbin cases have slots that act as a hook for the thread. The bobbin has to be put in so that the thread can be pulled back to snap in that hook. The balance or hand wheel is used to send the needle thread down after the bobbin thread. Hold the needle thread as it goes down. Then pull it up so that the loop of the bobbin thread comes up through the hole. Then both threads are drawn under and behind the pressure foot.
What happens if you don't draw out the threads?
When you start sewing, the machine will make knots in the thread and jam.
How do you thread the top part of the machine?
Place the spool on its pin. Leave about 18 inches of thread hanging. Put the thread through the first guides. Then between the correct plates of the needle tension.
What's that little wire?
That's a tension spring. The thread must be under it. Then through the take-up lever and down through the guides to the needle.
Are all machines threaded the same way?
They may look different, but the threading sequence is always the same. Spool, guides, tension plates, the take-up lever, always in its highest position, other guides, finally through the needle and out the back. Although it is a must to do it right, it is easy to do. The sequence is always the same. Now, before sewing, check. Stop motion screw tight, pressure foot tight, threads out the back, pressure foot down, stitch regulator set. Sew a few inches on a sample to see if the stitch is even and firm, both top and bottom.
What would happen if we run the machine without any cloth?
All the threads would jam up under the throat plate. Cut the thread with scissors, or like this. After a few practice periods with a machine, you can have as much confidence and skill as this student. She is making the neck facing for her own dress.
In our sewing classes, we learned which styles suit us best, how to select patterns, how to buy fabrics, and many other skills related to sewing.
Learning how to sew skillfully will give you much pleasure. Besides making beautiful clothes, you can add your own touch of genius to your home.
maybe that's what I need to learn, is how to sew. I've always wanted to learn how to sew, but I really have not had the patience, nor a sewing machine. But I think my mother-in-law left her sewing machine with us. So maybe that's the thing I'm going to learn as an adult. The other thing I learned as an adult was how to use chopsticks, and I'm pretty good at it. So maybe I can learn how to repair clothes and sew simple things like puppets and darn socks and things like that. And, yeah, I mean, super useful. I feel I've always said this, that that film was made for home economics class, and I think everybody should be required to take home economics in high school, because it teaches you how to sew, teaches you how to cook food, how to shop, teaches you how to balance your checkbook, about budgeting, all this amazing stuff, about nutrition, all the stuff that college-bound people had to kind of guess, and didn't do a good job of, given my experience and my peers. So, anyways, have another film set up on the Telecity. Again, I have probably 5,000 films that I've already digitized on a variety of different hard drives, but I really am trying to use the Telecity as much as possible to go and find some films that we haven't seen and watch them live, like almost a 21st century world premiere. And so this next one is Working Together. Enjoy.
Morning.
Good morning.
Aren't you the new girl in Miss Dietrich's section? What's your name?
Linda, what's yours?
Bill. Oh, this is where I work. I'll see you, Linda.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good morning. Good morning. We've got a big project that absolutely has to get out today.
What kind of a project?
A bid on a big contract. Proposals, cost estimates, specifications, the work. It'll be worth $2.5 million if we get it. Does anybody know where Margie is? Know anything about her? Well, then I'm going to have to divide up Margie's work among the rest of you.
Oh, I wanted to go shopping on my lunch hour, and I'll bet this is going to mess it all up.
I always end up doing someone else's work, on top of everything else I do around here.
After only a month in the job, it's hard enough trying to do my own work without having to do somebody else's work, too. When I was in school, I thought that the hardest part about working in an office was learning the different routines and procedures. The big challenge, though, was just getting along with all the different people. I think I do most of the time. With all the kinds of people that you run into, it's not always easy.
Does this make sense to you?
No. But if it's there, it must be right.
I still don't get it.
Oh, a lot of stuff I type. I don't understand. But it's my job to type it, not to understand it.
Well, I'm going to ask Mrs. Dietrich about it anyway. Mrs. Dietrich? This doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, the company's design, miniaturization, electric components. Well, I'm quite sure it isn't right. If a goof like that had gone out, it would make the company look pretty stupid.
Go to the man who wrote it and get him to correct it personally. Oh, and on your way, stop by engineering with these specifications and accounting with these cost estimates and get the supervisors there to okay them before they're included in the proposal.
Okay.
Okay, I'll be right out. Oh, hi, you must be the gal from Steno that caught me with my foot in my mouth.
Yes.
Well, just put the papers here on my desk and I'll correct them. I'll get them back to you sometime this afternoon.
Well, my boss told me to wait for the corrections and bring them back with me.
Look, I can't do them just now. I've got an appointment upstairs with my boss and I'm late now.
But the stuff has got to be retyped and it's got to go out this afternoon.
Well, I'll be back in about a half an hour. Can I wait till then?
I suppose so.
Great.
I've got a couple of other stops I can...
Now, these look fine. As soon as accounting okays them, they can go into the proposal.
Well, I wasn't told to show these to accounting. They're supposed to see the cost estimates.
Well, accounting has based a big part of their estimate on these list of parts and specifications. They'd better double-check them to make sure that they jibe, or the company could end up spending a lot of money that it hadn't budgeted for.
I see. Okay. I'm finally learning where all the departments are and what each one does. Still, there's a lot I don't know about how they work together. Well, that's just what I'll have to know if I want to be a secretary. And Mr. Hawkins in engineering said to be sure and give you these specifications and part lists so you could check them against the cost estimate.
Good. I'm glad he did. I'll come back to you right after lunch.
Okay.
Did you get the corrections from Mr. Burns yet?
Yes, they're right here. Where's Mrs. Dietrich?
Having a heart-to-heart with Margie. She finally showed up about 15 minutes ago.
Well, Margie, this has been happening from time to time, getting more and more frequent with you, that you don't come in at all, or if you do, and you're late, you don't call.
Well, I figure it's better just to hop in a cab and get right on over here. Well, the work still gets done anyway. It doesn't make any difference.
Yes, it does make a difference, especially today. We are under terrific pressure. Today we have this big proposal that has to get out tonight. And everybody has to work together. You are being paid to do your job. And when you're not here to do it, everybody has to help out by doing a little bit of your work. And that isn't fair, Margie. Do you see what I mean?
Guess so. Honestly, Mrs. D, I don't want to work in an office. I want to get married.
But it's not that simple. When I was your age, I felt the same way. But then my husband wanted to go back to school to earn another degree, and I had to go to work because we needed the money. And because I had a good work record, it was easy for me to get a good job. Now, you don't have a good work record, and if that happens to you, you're going to be in trouble. I wonder if I make you see what I'm saying, Margie. You owe us something, and we owe you something. Everybody has to work together. I'm sorry, Margie. I'm going to have to put you on probation.
Oh. I didn't know it was that serious. I'm sorry.
I am too, Margie.
Him performing twice before, but I want to see it again because they tell me.
Say, I hear they're going to be laying off in your section if they don't get that big contract.
Well, nobody told me about that.
Well, that's the way I hear it. And when you've been around as long as I have, you get to hear these things.
Well, I guess I'll just have time to look in the Help Wanted ads before I go back to work. Come on, Linda.
You've been here a long time. Do you think it's true? About the layoffs?
I haven't heard anything about it. And rumors like that are always going around. They usually don't mean anything.
Just what I need now. To get laid off. Now I won't be able to move into my new apartment. I'll lose my deposit.
This kind of work isn't like you, Linda. Is something the matter?
I heard that some people in this department might get laid off if we don't get that contract, and I was wondering if I'd be one of them.
Well, where did you hear that?
From a woman in another department.
Well, now, even if it were true, which it isn't, how would she really know? Now, whether we get this contract or not, there's going to be more work for our section. I'm going to have to hire another girl.
That's a relief.
Well, next time come to me with things like that. It'll save you and me a lot of time and trouble and a couple of dollars for the company.
We're working as fast as we can, but I doubt we'll be completely through at 5.
Look, I don't care what it takes, and I don't care how long it takes. I want that job out tonight, and I want it right.
My people are working as fast as they can.
I'd like to ask about my vacation.
About your what?
My vacation?
Well, you could have picked a better time. What about your vacation?
Well, I'm sorry, but you were busy all morning, and I have to know by tonight. Some friends have invited me to go with them, but they've got to know right away whether I'm free when they decide to leave.
I'm sorry about being abrupt. It's a fair question. When do you want to go?
August 16th to the 27th.
Oh, that's Pat's time, and she's been here longer than you.
Oh, wow. I'll probably never get a chance like this again.
Well, getting a choice of your vacation dates is something that goes with seniority. When you've been here a longer time, you'll have the choice, too. Do you understand?
I understand, but...
Why don't you talk it over with Pat? If she has no definite plans, maybe she'll switch dates with you.
Yeah. Okay, I think I will.
Hold it a minute, girls. Will you please? This stuff has to get out tonight. Pat, can you work overtime tonight?
Okay, but it's too much for me to do alone.
I know. What about you, Linda?
I've got a date tonight.
My little boy is in a program at his school tonight. I'd hate to disappoint him by not being there.
Okay, I'll stay. But I've got to make a phone call first.
Well, don't call everything off. We'll be out of here at 6:30 or 6:45 at the latest.
Thanks, Linda. That's a favor I owe you.
Everybody knows that if you're going to work in an office, you have to know how to type, spell, file, and so on. But sometimes people forget how important it is to work together to keep the company running smoothly. It just makes your own work easier. Here's that proposal Mrs. Dietrich called you about.
Oh, okay. Hey, you're really working late, aren't you?
What time is it?
25 to 7.
Gotta run.
How about coffee?
No, not tonight.
Maybe tomorrow, huh?
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
When you're under a lot of pressure, like today, it's easy to see how everything will fall apart unless you cooperate. So if cooperation works so well on pressure days, it ought to make things a lot easier every day.
We've seen others in this series, I believe. I love it. I love that OCR computer font. Yeah, big fan. So I also love the griping. Like, well, she doesn't come in, so I have to cover for her and all that. So it's really great. And I have other films like that deal with working with other dynamics. Including some that were like filled with some cursing. I don't know. But here's something that's interesting. Like on the film itself was this. Let's see if I can do this without blowing it out. Sticker, electronically inspected. So if you had a film inspection machine, like RTI made them, and I've gone through 3 of them. They also would include these stickers, and what you do is when the film was returned, after it was lent out to a teacher or whoever, the person would at the library or wherever the film belonged would run it through the RTI, and some of them actually had these things that would look for splices, and also would clean the film, and then you run it through it. You see if there's any issues, if there are any repairs that have to be made, if you have to bill somebody for stapling films together or just completely messing something up. And that's why sometimes it says, please don't rewind in a film can, because they want to be able, they provide the film, they provide the take-up reel, and then they rewind it themselves, and it allows them to go and inspect. So I have, somewhere I have a roll of these that are yellow, and he doesn't have a nose. So there you go. There's that. This is part of a series about fallout shelters, and this is public safety measures, or safety measures in public shelters. Enjoy.
The value of a community shelter can be greatly enhanced if the shelter has a plan for safety. The responsibility for safety is that of the manager and his safety team. Shelters should be inspected regularly to see that safety equipment and supplies are in place, in operating condition, and ready to support the plan. Three important elements of shelter safety are fire prevention and fighting, maintenance of order, and emergency escape. This manager is safety conscious. You can tell by the emphasis he gives it in his shelter operations plan. Note that in his operations chart, in the staff column, organization of a safety watch is shown as one of the first things to do. Then plan emergency action and drill. Below that, conduct safety inspections, and periodic safety and evacuation drills. Safety is vital in this shelter. It should be. Safety precautions begin in the first moments of occupancy. Provide a container in which to store personal items collected from occupants that may be potential hazards. List the items with the owner's names and tag them. This systematic procedure will make a good impression. It demonstrates the presence of authority and organization. Collect personal items as early as possible and place them in the container to show that they will be carefully protected. Useful items, such as food, flashlights, or radios, may be turned in and will supplement the shelter stocks for the good of all. Special foods and medicines should be stored to prevent loss or damage and given as needed to the owner. Security personnel should be trained individuals who can control groups effectively or handle persons who ignore the rules. They will supervise the admission of occupants during the entry phase and prevent free movement either in or out of the shelter, especially during the dangerous radiation period. Good security is a positive contribution to morale, since the great majority of people desire law and order. Proper ventilation, temperature, and humidity are vital to shelter safety. They are the responsibilities of the health and sanitation team. 3 special instruments may be provided by the local community to help the teams do their job. One is the hygrometer for determining effective temperature and humidity. Others are the oxygen and carbon dioxide indicators. Shelter safety can be improved by taking appropriate actions when indicated by these instruments. The health and sanitation team also is responsible for first aid to the injured. It should include members who know how to handle casualties. The federal government provides a medical kit of essentials to treat illness and injuries. This kit and any other supplies provided by the community for more serious casualties should be checked regularly. The function of the safety team is to see that the shelter population does not fall victim to preventable hazards such as fire, fumes, smoke, poor ventilation, or collapse of the shelter. To do the job, the safety team needs equipment and trained personnel. Men with engineering and building maintenance experience should be organized pre-attack and made familiar with the potential hazards of their designated shelters, so that in emergencies, they may go into action with a minimum of delay. Their tools should be chosen to fit the potential hazards of the particular shelter. Shelter accidents may force shelter occupants into relatively unprotected areas temporarily. When it is safe to return to the shelter, the safety team should be competent to help RADEF personnel decontaminate the occupants and speed up re-entry. The collapse of a building overhead may leave shelter occupants largely unhurt but trapped. Here again, trained personnel enlisted in advance, experts in damage control, and firemen with tools can hold off further damage and injury to people until additional help can be summoned. Useful items may include an attention getter, such as whistle or powered megaphone, to advertise your presence for outside help when all else fails. An ever-present danger in shelters is fire. All shelters should be inspected pre-attack to determine the required extinguishers to fight fire and to note their types, sizes, quantities, and proper locations for use. Extinguishers should be strategically placed throughout the shelter for ready use, although in many places it may be better to store them at a central point to protect against loss or damage. If extinguishers are available in the building near the shelter, they should be identified for use in the shelter when needed. See that directions for use are posted prominently. Shelter occupants should be able to fight fires effectively and can with simple training. Extinguishers should be chosen to fight the potential hazards in the shelter. No one extinguisher is best for all types of fires. This dry chemical extinguisher is designed for electrical and oil fires and surface fires. In deep rubbish fires, the soaking effect of water is better. The soda acid extinguisher is familiar to many people and is easy to use. However, the extinguishing agent is water, and so should not be used on live electrical fires or flaming liquids, oil, fat, or gasoline. The stirrupump is ideal for shelters because it functions indefinitely, so long as there is a constant source of water. If running water is available, a hose that will reach all parts of the shelter is desirable. It should have a spray nozzle to make it suitable for oil fires. Don't use it with live electrical fires. But do not depend solely on hose, as water pressure may drop, leaving the shelter without fire protection. Inspect extinguishers regularly for broken, clogged, or damaged nozzles and hoses. Look for leaks or corrosion. Protect water extinguishers from freezing. Of course, the best fire protection is prevention. Provide sand buckets for cigarette disposal and reduce every fire hazard to a minimum. When the shelter is occupied, do not permit entry of unnecessary fire hazards that would defeat the fire safety provided by the safety team. Local governments are responsible for supplying security, extrication, and firefighting equipment, and for their proper safeguarding and maintenance. Prepare an inventory list of all equipment. Indicate when inspections are made. and that corrective action has been taken when required. With this personal inspection, this manager knows that his shelter is ready for use, and he knows that his safety team is competent. Its members are from town police, fire and rescue squads, from construction crafts and civil engineering and safety groups. The team knows the potential hazards in this shelter, has established rules, conducted drills, gotten advice, coordinated with the maintenance teams, and incorporated the results of their work in the shelter operations plan. This shelter, if the emergency comes, will be as well protected against the hazards from within as it is against the hazards from without.
I can check that gear in a minute, so don't touch anything, okay? Hey! Get down from there! Now! Hey! Turn it over!
What if it bumped that control by accident? You'd be mincemeat by now. What have I told you? You don't work on equipment when the engine's running.
Well, I told him not to touch anything. All right, I guess I wasn't thinking.
You weren't thinking? You mean you'll work on engines and machinery and not think of your own personal safety? Here. Shake hands with danger.
Shake hands with danger. Meet a man you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety. Now they call me Three-Fingered Joe. I was young and feisty, never did things by the book. Just let me get my toolbox and I'll take myself a look. I climbed up on a dozier with my mechanic's pride. Said, you can keep it running, friend, while I poke around inside. Shake hands with danger, meet a guy you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety, now they call me Three-Fingered Joe. Although I learned a lesson, I forgot it soon enough. The nicks and burns and scratches showed the young ones I was tough. Till another morning I was grinding on some steel. My other hand got careless and fed my skin into the wheel. Shake hands with danger, step right up and say hello. Grinding wheels and metal are what made me Three-Fingered Joe. I've seen mechanics burning and I've seen them take a fall just to save themselves a minute. I've seen them lose it all. I've watched them courting trouble, seen them take a chance and lose. They get careless for a moment and spend a lifetime with the blues. Shake hands with some friends I used to know. Compared to them, I'm lucky to be just Three-Finger Joe.
All right. Yeah. Maybe this will be my mask for Halloween, is a electronically inspected sticker. Put on a smiley face, being electronically inspected. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Thank you so much for the coffee. You can buy us coffee at buymeacoffee.com/avgeeks. You can also go to avgeeks.com and see other shows that we've done in the past and other films that we've uploaded, and you can buy DVDs. And why not tell the world that you like AV Geeks by hitting thumbs up or all the other ways that social media will let you say that you enjoy this and you think it should exist after the social media AI takes over. We'll be back again tomorrow, 1 o'clock, and we'll watch some more films, and it will be fun. And everybody, where am I? Can't find myself. Not really doing a good job here. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.